Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another very exciting episode of LexTalk World Talk Show presented by Clickaway Creators. Today, the personality we have with us is named Women Icon of the Year 2021 by Times Women. She is also a member of Indian Women History Museum, which records, shares, and celebrates Indian women history throughout time. Having garnered legal experience across two very niche industries of ICT and manufacturing, this included being Regional Legal Counsel Asia-Pacific for ATOS, a French information, communications, and technology multinational corporation, heading all legal and compliance matters for the Australian continent, New Zealand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries in APAC region. She has been the Senior Legal Counsel for Global Operations and Manufacturing for Ansell for the past 2 years. So we have today with us is Shalinee Fernandez. Shalinee graduated with a law degree from the University of London in 1999 and the University of New England, Australia in 2020, and was admitted as an advocate and solicitor to the High Court of Malaya in October 2002. With close to 19 years of experience, 5 years in private practice as a partner undertaking both litigation and corporate world, and the last 14 years as an in-house counsel for both local and multinational corporation, Shalinee carries the best of the knowledge and learning from both sides of the table. So welcome, Shalinee, to the show, and how are you doing this morning?
Firstly, thank you, Vinay, for having me on board on the show. It's truly a privilege to be on this platform. I'm doing well and doing as well as I can be in the midst of this never-ending pandemic. But thank you for having me on board. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure for us as well to have you on the show. And without any further ado, let's quickly deep dive and first understand about a complex legal issue you've worked on. If you could please describe the complexity and tell us how you approached it.
I think handling a portfolio of global operations in itself within the space of the personal protective industry is something which is already very challenging, as you would probably appreciate. And it was already challenging pre-COVID. Now, post-COVID, what we saw was a huge tide of new dynamics that came into play in terms of, because it's a global operations, the entire operations had to be revamped in terms of contracts. We saw a large change in our global supply chain operations, given we've got suppliers all over the world. It was all crippled because we had a system in place in terms of global logistics. So what we had to do was to essentially, and this is where the complexity comes in, we had to essentially sit down with each of our contracts, which were all very standard based, churned out like boilerplates, revamp every single legal clause there, simply because we had challenges from a logistics perspective, delivery. So it was, if you may, a chain effect that happened throughout all these contracts. So I think that the largest one would be even like securing a space on a shipping platform to, given all ports had shut down, and it was really the question of, and I think this is where the challenge came to me as a lawyer, in the sense that illegalities have to be certain. How do you weave it into a contract where there is so much of uncertainty, right? So you had to kind of balance both equilibriums. And I think in terms of looking at certainty, we had to somehow come up with a certain ambit. And these contracts go on for 3 to 4 years. So anything could happen on the 3rd and 4th year, wherein we are already locked in, simply because we didn't want to move too much or move too little. So a lot of these things came to play, and a lot of time was spent not only speaking within the team itself, but speaking to our partners, our suppliers. At the end of the day, you can have the best of contracts, but it needs to cater for both parties, right? So, to simply spell out one issue would be really hard, but to really sit down and we worked through each of the situations for each of the suppliers who had separate issues, some had warehousing issues, some had, delivery issues, some were relying on their own material suppliers. So putting all that in and going through each clause, ensuring that both parties would be covered, and at the same time ensuring that force majeure would be able to come in to, step in to assist both parties, was essentially what we did. And even as we speak today, those contracts are still evolving. there's always contract amendments which are being put in, whenever raw material prices skyrocket, and we are in the gloves industry, so we rely a lot on latex, and a lot of these things are very, things which are commodities, always moving every day. So I think, and just to point out, the most recent issue, I believe, complex issue we are facing now is in Sri Lanka, given the volatility in the country, and how the Sri Lankan rupee versus the USD is actually faring. So what we used to have is fixed term contracts, and suddenly we find ourselves having to come up with another pricing mechanism that needs to sit outside of this fixed term to ensure there's a base template that both parties can agree to. So although these are all commercial in nature, it will eventually point to responsibilities and liabilities of both parties. So I would say, in a nutshell, in terms of complexities, it has been nothing short of, I suppose, challenging in the operations industry, and I hope that was quite clear, and hoping to at least answer that question.
Absolutely, you did. You just nailed it. And I think our viewers will also be able to understand that what kind of uncertainty everyone would agree that pandemic has kind of put all of us into. And just continuing on the pandemic, so we also saw some courts being moving towards more remote proceedings and availability. In your opinion, is this sustainable and a possible way to increase access to justice?
I believe, times have changed so much. And I think to remain relevant, we need to move with those changing times. Whether it's ideal, maybe yes, maybe no. But what other choice do we have? And if you were to ask me, the simple answer to that question would be, certainly nothing would beat the element of being physically present. Because as we all know, there are many people out there who do not possess tablets, smartphones, laptops, for them to even, present themselves as a witness, or and the like. So, it's all they know is, court attendance, the old-fashioned way. But having said that, I think this is where lawyers really need to step it up in terms of, helping their clients, being that element that bridges the gap between the judiciary and the courts and their normal client, an innocent bystander on the road who's seeking fervently for such justice. Perhaps get them to the lawyers' offices who would actually have such facilities available, and then accommodate it to ensure that the clients still do not get any sort of compromise in the elements of how they can present their case. So I'm a firm believer that, things will always continue to change, as we have seen, most importantly in the last 2 years, and the question is, we just need to remain resilient, agile, and adapt. So would this process be built up better to ensure that there's less travesties of justice? I believe so. I believe we're getting more mature in terms of how we conduct remote proceedings and, how we bridge the gap. We've had to think on our feet. And I think we will be able to improvise it and bridge the gap between, reaching out to our clients to ensure that there's no compromise on the quality of justice.
I think I'd like to point out when you said that the lawyers needs to become the bridge between their clients and the judicial system, even if their clients are not handy with those devices, with those technologies. Probably we can help them out, and this is exactly what we were doing before the pandemic as well. It's just that there is a new fashion and there is a new way of doing it now through technology. But you're absolutely right, and I completely echo you on that point. I would like to move on to the next question with that, Shalinee, and this one talks about, if time is money in any profession, and in legal it's most of all, how do you ensure to make the best out of your time as a lawyer?
See, for me, time can never be equated with the concept of money. I will always say that the concept of money is perhaps a subset of time, but it can never equate because, as we all know, time once lost is lost forever, and no amount of commodities in the world would ever be able to equate to that. And this is where I feel that time is so important, especially in today's fast-moving world. I value my time very much. And, even if it means, someone comes and says to me, this amount is the amount we're giving you. If it's not going to be worth my time, I will say no. I'm probably doing something more substantial, and it may not necessarily equate to money. It could be something else, like assisting a client who's underprivileged and things like that, where there's no money equation involved. But holistically, you would have made better use of your time. So I really, I think we can seek to try and quantify time in terms of money. But I think in the long run, it's certainly a commodity or a concept which is, which I feel it should be held in isolation. And what is happening today is, I think, and I'd really like to say this, because as a lawyer, as our portfolio grows and things become more challenging, it always boils down to how we manage our time. And I've seen the busiest of people, really world-class leaders, how they are able to sit down and manage so many things. So what does that say? It's all about how we, use time to the best of our, abilities. And obviously, if I'm not forsaking the concept of money. At best we can all be compensated with the concept of money. There's no other way we can be compensated for lost time. So it does go hand in hand. But like I just like to sort of just kind of point out that, I think time once lost, you can never regain it. And you can at best try to compensate it with the element of money. Happy to answer questions on that if you want to elaborate.
No, I just wanted to ask, just a follow-up question on that, because I'm sure our viewers would like to understand, you being in the industry for 19 years, how do you manage your time? If there are some best practices that you would like to share.
Oh, it has only become more challenging in these last few years, simply because I've also started studying. And to be able to have a cutoff to your timetable, and especially working in global ops across different time zones and jurisdictions, it's not that simple. Where you can switch off your laptop at 6 or 7 and say, I'm done, and I jump into my studies. I'm trying very hard to do that, and I still haven't been able to. So I think it's very important that, and this is where the word prioritize comes in. You should be able to prioritize it as in terms of your work. What are the most urgent tasks? And I think, having been a lawyer for about 19 years, you would be at that stage able to, decipher what is of critical urgency versus what is not so critical, and set that as your to-do tasks, for the day, and take it as it goes along. Obviously, this system will also get sort of disrupted, because you will have sudden urgent requests coming in, which will throw a spanner to the entire scheme of things. Again, you need to sit down and analyze, so it's always a question of allocating, changing, rebalancing, being able to think on your feet, and I suppose coming up with the best way possible to manage time.
Okay, that's amazing. I think that really helps. So with that, we come to the end of this quick chat with you, Shalinee. Thank you so much for sharing those great insights with us. And I'm sure our viewers would be able to make some notes that would really help them to grow in their careers. We would love to have a chat again with you in future on some other trending topics in the legal fraternity. For our viewers, with that, we come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Vinay for LexTalk signing off.